Hi everyone. Today we invite Dr. Ian Preston to get to know your professor. How are you, Ian?
I'm fine, thanks. Are you?
I'm good, thank you. So can you start by give us a short introduction of yourself and the courses you teach at UCL?
Yeah, I'm Ian Preston. I teach the core micro course to second year undergraduates, and I teach public economics to MSc students, and I'm the department's graduate tutor. And I've been in the department since 1991, so 30 years this week.
That's quite a long time. So let's start our first question. That is, how did you come to economics and why did you decide to choose to pursue a career in academia?
Well, I came to economics at university. They didn't offer economics at the school where I was, so if they had, I would have avoided it because I didn't really know what it was. I probably thought it was like accountancy or something like that, something very uninteresting. But I did sciences. I did physics, maths, biology, and I was going to go and do those things at university, but I got interested in politics and philosophy, and I decided to do physics and philosophy. But then the school, my headmaster persuaded me, if you're really interested in those things, don't do physics and philosophy. Nobody else will be doing that. Do politics and philosophy. So I did that, and economics just came with it. And of course, I discovered when I actually took it that it's it has the sort of maths and the modeling that I was used to from the sciences I'd done, but combined that with the practical social questions that I was interested in, and also touched on philosophy as well. And it was really the ideal combination of the sort of things I was actually interested in, and I pursued it from then on. Why did I become an academic? I suppose I like being a student. I liked learning. I liked solving intellectual problems. So I just carried on along that line. That takes you towards being an academic. And eventually you start doing research and teaching, and I was okay at those sort of things. But it's a sort of job that suits me. I'm fairly quiet, not particularly outgoing sort of person. I'm probably happiest just being with a book in a library or something. So that sort of person can get ahead in academia is a sort of career that can suit that sort of person. So that's how I ended up as an academic.
Thank you. You've just mentioned that you use the modeling methods you have learned in physics and apply to economics to solve some social problems you are interested in. And I also noticed that you have studied in many different interesting topics, for example, sports. So how did you come up with so many interesting topics?
Well, I mean, there is a common theme to the sort of things I work on. It's all applied microeconomic type things. That touches on a lot of different fields, and I just look at things that I'm interested in. Sport. That's a fairly small part of the things I work on, but sport does have interesting economic aspects to it. There's lots of ordinary economic questions that come up in sport, but there are also specific questions to do with, the way competition in sport is organized around leagues, where the demand depends on competition between sporting competition between the different clubs that are taking part. These are all interesting economic questions, I think.
Our next question is that I noticed that you have maintained a very amazing website which records the history of the economists and the statistician in London. And it's a very big map and includes many routes. So if I want to spend the weekend with my friends visiting some of the places, which route would you recommend most to us?
Yeah. Well, those walks, that originated in a big conference that was held at UCL some years ago. Brought a lot of people into London who thought it'd be an interesting idea to just or find a route around the Bloomsbury area, just to show them some of the sites that are associated with economists around there, like Keynes and Jevons and Bentham and people like that. But I was the person who was doing that, and it soon became apparent to me that actually there's hundreds of sites over London that are connected to the history of economics. It's the birthplace of some of the most famous economists like Ricardo and Mill and Bentham and Marshall and so on. But also just because London is a centre of commerce and government and intellectual life. Even people not from London come to London in their lives to meet each other and so on. So there's loads and loads of sites all over London, and it's interesting that the history of that, or the geography follows the history. The older the sites to do with the older parts of economic thought, mercantilism and so on, they're all over in the east of London. And then if you go through to as you go through the 18th to the 19th century, you're moving westward over towards Soho and areas around there. And then as you go into the 19th century, it's going north up to Bloomsbury and out to Kensington, and then eventually out Hampstead and so on. So it's really very interesting. And eventually, as you say, I've got that map that's got several hundred places that you can visit, all organized into walks. You say, which one do I think is the most interesting of those? I like the ones out in the city of London to do with Ricardo and Bentham, but I think probably the best one is the one around Soho, because it's got a lot of people that are very widely known. Adam Smith, he's an example of the sort of person I'm talking about. He's Scottish. He's not obviously doesn't come from London, but The Wealth of Nations was published in London, and in the years before that, he was in London, and you can see where he lived, where he was staying. We know where the coffee houses were, where he was discussing things with people. That's all around the Trafalgar Square area. Smith's great friend David Hume, also, mainly we remember him as a philosopher, but also he was a very significant contributor to economics. He came to London. He stayed around there. He stayed in boarding houses around Leicester Square. He had a famous argument with Rousseau, philosopher. We know where that happened. It was near to Leicester Square. Just around the corner from that, there's the hotel where Marx stayed when he arrived in London, when he first arrived in London. And there's all sorts of sites on that particular walk as well to do with the history of statistics and things like that in London as well. So that's the one I'd recommend to you if you just want one of the walks, the Soho.
Thank you. So our last question is that, can you recommend us a favorite book? And it would be great if you can show us in front of the screen.
Yeah, well, it's quite difficult to choose one book. I've got lots of favorite books, so I didn't really know what basis to choose it, but I just thought I'd focus on this Get to Know Your Professor angle. That's the title of the thing we're doing here. And I was born in the 60s in Birmingham. I went to school there. I was like quite bookish, nerdy type of student. Went to university and eventually ended up in London. And all these things are true of the author of this book. I think most of them are true, possibly all of them here. This book, I don't know if you can see this author, Jonathan Coe. Okay, and this particular book here, I read this last year, and the main character in this book, all those things are true of that person as well. It's basically set in a very lightly fictionalized version of the school that I was at. And the person's life follows my life in many ways. I mean, it's not my story, it's Jonathan Coe's story, but still I recognize a lot of the things. It's actually the first one in a trilogy. Okay, it goes on from there to the Blair years with this volume. And then it goes on in the latest one here to Brexit. So he follows, the politics of the country and links it in with the life of these people, beginning basically where I began, Birmingham in school in the 1970s. So there's a book that you could look at.
Thank you for your recommendation, and thank you for your time and for